Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Providing Accommodations for Persons with Disabilities. Our webinar today is sponsored by the Walmart Foundation through our work with the My Free Taxes initiative. To get started, we're going to go over a couple of housekeeping items, and with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Nakia Matthews. Nakia?
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel, and if you accidentally close this panel, you can reopen it from the top menu by going to Communicate, Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the number you see here along with the meeting code, and you do not need to enter an attendee ID. And I will put this information in the chat box as well. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which you see in the lower right-hand corner of the webinar screen. If you'd like to make this panel larger, you can do so by minimizing some of the other panels like chat or Q&A. And conversely, if you do not need the captions, you can minimize the Media Viewer panel. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. You can send in any questions you have during the webinar to me, Nakia Matthews, or to Katie Metz. You can use the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will direct those questions accordingly during the Q&A portion. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may also ask questions by emailing them directly to either myself or Katie at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org or kmetz@ndi-inc.org. Please note this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the NDI website at the URL you see below. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me, Nakia Matthews, a message, or you may also email me at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org.
Thank you so much, Nakia. My name is Katie Metz again. I'm Manager of Financial Empowerment Inclusion for the National Disability Institute, and once again I welcome you to today's webinar. We want to, of course, give a special thank you to all of our sponsors, including Bank of America, Accorda Therapeutics, Burton Blatt Institute, our partners at IRS, and of course today's webinar being sponsored by the Walmart Foundation. If you're not familiar with National Disability Institute, we are a national research and development organization, and our mission is to promote economic and income preservation and asset development for persons with disabilities to build a better future for Americans with disabilities. Many of you may have known us previously when we worked with many coalitions across the country on our Real Economic Impact Tour. We are now transitioned into our Real Economic Impact Network, which is an alliance of organizations and individuals dedicated to advancing the economic empowerment of individuals with disabilities across the country. We have over 900 partners in more than 100 cities in the United States. This includes nonprofits, community tax coalitions, such as many of you joining us today, asset development organizations, financial education initiatives, local government agencies, and individuals with families with disabilities. All of these partners come together to join forces to embrace and pursue access to and inclusion of persons with disabilities in the economic mainstream, which a lot of what we will be talking about today is really working towards access and accommodations to ensure all individuals with or without disabilities are able to access goods and services being provided. Our agenda for today, we're going to go over a couple of disability facts to really set the scene for what it is we're talking about and why we want to encourage individuals to reach out to persons with disabilities. We're also going to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act, giving a brief overview of the ADA with a few case scenarios that will help in understanding how to effectively serve taxpayers within with diverse disabilities, the benefits of developing partnerships with disability organizations, and then finally different tools, resources, and support that the National Disability Institute has created and made available to individuals, organizations, and different partners within our REI network. So to get started, wanted to go over a few facts. We know that to be successful in the field of community tax preparation and asset building, And as we strive to grow prosperity, not poverty, in the United States, we know it's essential to engage and be inclusive of both persons with disabilities and their families through outreach and program implementation. Acknowledging that sustainability for our future must be inclusive of persons with disabilities, while embracing technology, we provide free online tools, tips, and resources to a myriad of partners along with collaborative technical assistance to build their capacity to reach and serve the millions of Americans with disabilities. So did you know that 1 in 5 Americans has a disability? 20 million families have at least one member of their family who is a person with a disability. That people with disabilities are 2 to 5 times more likely to experience poverty than individuals without disabilities. And 54% of taxpayers with disabilities earn less than $20,000, which is the aggregated gross income compared to 35% of taxpayers without disabilities. This information alone kind of sets the stage to see where we would absolutely encourage those of you providing resources and services to individuals throughout the country who are low-income, underserved populations. Why we would want to make sure that the services being provided are accessible to persons with disabilities as well. National poverty estimates, so individuals between the ages of 18 and 64 show that for individuals without disabilities, 12.8% had income below the poverty level over the past 12 months. However, for individuals with disabilities, more than 2 times that rate, we're at 27.3% had income below the poverty level. Once again, just setting the stage to understand why it is we talk about reaching out to persons with disabilities who are often a very large part of the demographics that many of us are serving. People with disabilities are more likely to be unemployed and live in poverty than any other single demographic group in the United States today. We know that it is vital to make sure that we are ensuring sites, accessible services are available to individuals with disabilities. We also know that public benefit programs for persons with disabilities, especially the Social Security, supplemental Social Security income, are not aimed at increasing assets and independence for persons with disabilities, more so than any other population on a fixed income. So we want to ensure that we're providing adequate resources when it comes to asset development opportunities for persons with disabilities. I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Karen Hamilton. I've worked with Karen for several years now on a number of projects, one being the TaxAccess project that we'll talk about later today, many of you have heard of. Karen was designated by the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities as a Southeast ADA Center state partner in 1999. She has a background in working with grassroots advocacy groups promoting the inclusion of people with disabilities. Her work with various grant projects has provided her with the ability to lead the North Carolina ADA network, and she has successfully designed a statewide ADA network comprised primarily of grassroots disability-run organizations interested in facilitating voluntary compliance with the ADA. It's been my pleasure to present with Karen on a number of occasions, and so I welcome you, Karen, to start off today. Karen?
Thank you, Katie. Again, I'm Karen Hamilton, and I am the consultant with the TaxAccess project, which is a project of the National Disability Institute and the Southeast ADA Center in Atlanta. First of all, we're going to, basically, I'm going to cover the basics of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The goal of the ADA regarding individuals with disabilities is to assure equal opportunity, full participation, independent living in one's community, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. Many people don't think about economic self-sufficiency being a part of the law, but in order to be fully participate in your community, often that includes having a job and even paying your taxes. So what does economic self-sufficiency mean for persons with disabilities? It really means increased access to training and employment opportunities, improved knowledge of financial capability strategies and tax services, increased community integration and inclusion, less need for public benefits, and improved quality of life and independence. far as VITA sites are concerned, there are several things that affect the ADA requirements that affect VITA sites. First of all, you want to make sure that there's access to goods and services in an integrated setting, or so that everyone could have access to the same services as everyone else. Eliminate or modify unnecessary eligibility standards, policies, or procedures that deny equal opportunity. And we're going to go over each of these individually with more examples in a few minutes. Reasonable modifications and auxiliary aids to ensure effective communication. Facility access and removal of barriers, and maintaining those accessible features and equipment. In regards to facility access, can people with disabilities arrive at the site, approach the building, and enter as freely as everyone else? Does your site have accessible parking, and are those accessible parking spaces closest to the accessible entrance? Is there a route of travel that's 36 inches wide to the building entrance that does not require the use of steps or stairs? Do all inaccessible entrances have signs indicating the location of the nearest accessible entrance? And those signs, in the case of a VITA site, could just be temporary signs that are poster board put up to let people know where to go if those signs are not already there. Are VITA services located on an accessible path of travel? And again, that accessible path of travel should be 36 inches wide. Examples of barrier removal would be installing ramps or temporary ramps, making curb cuts at sidewalks and entrances, or making sure that you are located in a place that has those amenities, rearranging tables, chairs, display racks, plants, and other furniture to make sure that they're not blocking that accessible path of travel. Widening your doorways, and some might think, well, how am I going to widen an existing doorway? It could be, in some cases in older buildings, an accessible doorway is 32 inches wide, and sometimes just removing the door will give you that extra space if you can do that. Relocating activities to an accessible location. For example, if you're not able to widen that doorway, perhaps you could move the VITA services to a spot that is accessible and on an accessible path of travel. And I'm going to let Katie talk about our first scenario.
Thank you, Karen. So, first scenario we have here regarding facility access. John is the new local coordinator for a small tax aid site at a local community center in rural Idaho. He has just learned that the community center where the site has been located for years is going to be closed due to budget cuts, and he needs to find a new site in the community. What type of issues should he be concerned about when considering a new space? I'd also like to add, this is a really good scenario for any individual sites who may have an existing site or be looking to open a new site. So with that, Karen, I'm going to let you go ahead over some of the things that you would consider when either moving, looking at a new site, or opening additional sites.
Well, we've already gone over some of those things. And first of all, basically, you want to be able to arrive at the facility, have a barrier-free pathway into the facility and all the way to where your VITA services are being located. There's some excellent tools that you can use that we'll go over in a few minutes to a checklist for existing facilities that you can use and other resources for that. So let's talk about a few of those. One of the resources you can use is to contact your local independent living center. They can provide hands-on support for you and perhaps even come with you to do an accessibility assessment of a facility that you're looking at and give you some really good suggestions. Also, you can call or visit the TaxAccess website for a facility accessibility checklist and also ask other questions you might need when looking for a new site. Again, partnerships. It really is important to reach out to the disability organizations in your community so that they can help you find that new location and perhaps even host a VITA site for you. You may want to be looking for a new tool that's coming out the 1st of January or sometime in January called the disability outreach tool is coming out the 1st of January. Sorry about that. Basically, you want to really look at universal access, and providing good accessibility really benefits everyone. It allows the person with a disability and older adults to easily travel from the parking lot or drop-off area to where your VITA service is being provided inside your building. Parents with small children and baby strollers, delivery workers, staff carrying packages also benefit from good accessible design. It really makes your facility safer for everyone. Again, I talked about earlier the ADA checklist for readily achievable barrier removal is a good resource for you to use because it just provides the basic, and in addition, it can help you identify barriers and also some solutions to those barriers. Next, modifying your policies and procedures. What are the policies and procedures for serving people with disabilities at your VITA site? Are they written down? Do people know where they are? How do you notify customers that reasonable accommodations may be provided upon request? How do you process an accommodation request from a person with a disability? And have all of the VITA workers been informed about the site's accessible features and customer service practices? Some examples of reasonable modifications of policies and procedures might include making sure that service animals are welcomed, even in a building that perhaps that has a policy where no pets are allowed, but service animals are allowed. You may want an allow extended appointment time for someone, for example, who has a communication disability or speech disability, so that they have enough time to complete what they came there to do. You may want to provide a private, quiet office or area that has less distractions for people who are hard of hearing or have cognitive disabilities where background noise can really affect their ability to communicate. You may want to allow tape recording of a meeting or a session. And again, you might want to provide sensitivity training to all your volunteers on the topics such as mental illness or physical accessibility or just disability sensitivity in general. Communication access, and that's probably one of the most important things that you will be doing at your VITA site, and many people sometimes overlook this. They think of ramps and doorways and accessible paths of travel, but it's more than just, accessibility is more than just the physical features. Public and private entities must take steps to ensure that communications with people with disabilities are as effective as communications with others. And effective communication means that whatever is written or spoken must be as clear and understandable to everyone, including people with disabilities. Effective communication is required except when it would fundamentally alter the nature of service or a program or result in an undue burden. It applies to all members of the public, including people that are participating in your program, individuals who are contacting your business about your VITA services, or even the VITA workers or volunteers are included in that. And do you provide auxiliary aids upon request? The ADA requires that public entities that make auxiliary aids and services available, that you make auxiliary aids and services available to ensure effective communication. And basically, auxiliary aids and services or devices or accommodations that can ensure effective communication for customers with disabilities. VITA sites can provide equal communication access many different ways, but not all ways will work for all customers. Generally, the requirement to provide an auxiliary aid or service is triggered when a person with a disability requests it. So what is an auxiliary aid or service? And so there are examples for depending on the type of disability. For people who are deaf and hard of hearing, some examples of auxiliary aids and services may include a qualified interpreter. They may include a note taker, video remote interpreting, where you use streaming video through a laptop or even a tablet to connect with an interpreter off-site. amplified telephones, text messaging, instant messaging, assisted listening systems, written materials, and open or closed captioning on your videos, and there and many others that are listed on the list on our slides here. Examples of auxiliary aids and services for people with visual disabilities could include large print materials, braille materials, your written materials in audio recording format, materials in electronic format, reading information. Something as simple as reading the information aloud to a customer would be considered an auxiliary aid or service. Providing assistance with completing forms or even reading the tax forms. The speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Types of auxiliary aids or services required for effective communication really depend on the length, the complexity of the communication, and the format. Basic aids or services may be appropriate for brief or simple face-to-face exchanges. For example, it may be okay to exchange written notes with a customer who is deaf who's making an appointment, or instant messaging on a computer or texting to each other to communicate with a customer who is hard of hearing about a basic tax question, or assisting a customer with a disability to complete a tax form. However, more advanced auxiliary aids and services may be needed when you're doing tax preparation, you're in meetings or interviews, or training, or counseling, or if misunderstanding has occurred due to ineffective communication. For example, a person who's deaf may request an American Sign Language interpreter for their tax preparation appointment. A person who is hard of hearing may request a note taker during their tax preparation time. A customer who's deaf may also request tax preparation appointment using a video remote interpreting service. So basically, effective communication will depend on the type of communication and that you will need. What you will need to promote effective communication will depend on the type of communication that you're having with the customer. When to provide a qualified interpreter. When an interpreter is requested by a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, the interpreter that you provide must be qualified. And a qualified interpreter under the ADA is defined as one who is able to interpret effectively, accurately, and impartially, both receptively and expressively, using any necessary specialized vocabulary. And so it's very important when that person is making that accommodation and request that you get the information you need from them on what type of interpreter that they need. Another thing to know is under the revised 2008 ADA regulations, a public or private business cannot require an individual with a disability to bring another person with them to interpret for him or her. So how do you find a qualified interpreter? The National Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, or RID, hosts an online database that you can use. You can seek referrals from your state office of deaf and hard of hearing, or local chapters of your National Association of the Deaf, or individual or from the individual requesting the interpreter can also give you some leads to finding interpreters. And start looking for an interpreter as soon as the need arises. And as the interpreters are hired, keep a database of contacts from those who were well received by your customers so that you can use them again in the future. And research the ability of your site to use remote interpreting for when it's difficult to secure an interpreter. And as far as, before we get to the case scenario, I just wanted to mention that it's so important to have a written policy and procedure on how to secure an interpreter, and also making sure that you and your publicity materials and your registration materials, you let people know how and how to make an accommodation request and what the deadline is for making that accommodation request. And Katie, I'm going to let you go over this case scenario.
Great, thanks, Karen. So communication access. I know that in working with many of our partners across the country, this really is one of the questions that comes up quite often for many of us. So here's a quick scenario. Rebecca is the local coordinator for a site that seems to have a large number of deaf taxpayers come in for services. The volunteers have always offered to write notes back and forth, and it's worked pretty well. But this year, a deaf taxpayer has scheduled an appointment insisting that the site provide an interpreter. Rebecca does not see why the taxpayer can't just bring a family member to assist, but the taxpayer says no. Rebecca does not have anyone on staff who knows sign language and does not know what to do. So Karen, can you suggest some possible resolutions to this scenario?
Well, first of all, it's really important to remember, as we discussed earlier, that the new 2008 ADA regulations state that you cannot require that an individual bring an interpreter with them, even if it's a family member that happens to be coming with them. Unless that person requests that they be able to use their family member and the family member agrees to it. So in this case, it's important that Rebecca's site has a written policy procedure so she'll know what to do and what the procedure is for, so they have planned in advance for how to accommodate someone who's requesting an interpreter. Strategies for effectively serving customers who are deaf or hard of hearing. Again, connect with all your state and local deaf and hard of hearing agencies to explore partnerships and leverage resources. Work together to train more deaf and hard of hearing customers to become VITA volunteers. That may be a great way to expand your resources. And offer My Free Taxes as a viable option in which taxpayers use the personal video phones, internet relay, or auxiliary devices to self-file with hotline assistance. What's very important is just partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. The more that you're connected with the disability community and disability organizations in your community, the better you're going to be able to serve people with disabilities. The benefits of partnerships are that you can brainstorm action steps with your partners to work together towards solutions and improving access. You can perhaps even share resources. You can improve access through technology and auxiliary aids like closed captioned videos, video relay interpreting, materials in Braille, and then other preferred devices that may be available in your region. Those partners may have access to, for example, Brailing, being able to do Brailing for you even. So those are the important partnerships to have. Coordinate disability, deaf and hard of hearing, mental awareness, mental health awareness trainings for your staff. Basically, disability awareness training for your staff is key, so that your staff and volunteers know what is available, what resources are available to them, what kind of support they may have, and so that they are able to comfortably serve people with disabilities. And increase understanding of VITA services and resources with your new partners. Many times those disability agencies may not even be aware of your services and will appreciate the opportunity to connect new customers to your service. And some action steps that you could possibly take with your disability partners are basically universal signage. They can, as I said, they can post and advertise your opportunities and events as well, and vice versa. They can research, recommend, and technology that you can use, perhaps even borrow technology or assistive listening devices, for example, from an agency to use during your VITA services. They can help connect with sign language interpreters and help you develop protocols for securing, paying, or even leveraging interpreters. You may want to also join any kind of local access work group or disability. Many times there are disability partnerships that are already serving in your community. You may want to become part of that coalition. the organized disability awareness trainings that can range from anything from interacting with deaf and hard of hearing taxpayers, sensitivity training on mental health disabilities, assisting blind or visually impaired taxpayers, and many of your partners may even be able to lead those trainings. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie for tools, resources, and support.
Thank you so much. So, we wanted to give you a few options to be able to access when you're reaching out to the disability community and really trying to ensure that you are providing access, accommodations, and how to do so. We have a number of tools and resources listed on our website, www.realeconomicimpact.org, and these will really assist partners in improving accessibility and accommodations for all persons with disabilities. We really work to enhance networking and communication to assist you in ensuring that all partners within your community are being engaged, providing education and training with access to experts such as Karen we have on the phone today, and local experts within your own community on disability outreach and accessibility. The tools will create interactive community of learning with innovative questions and dialogue, providing tips for different ideas and education around disability outreach and accessibility to work towards fostering that movement of economic empowerment for all individuals, inclusive of persons with disabilities and their families. One of the items we have are our virtual toolkit, which many of you may have seen in the past. We can encourage you to continue to check back with our toolkit, or if you have not seen it, to, again, go to realeconomicimpact.org and you'll be able to access our toolkit. We have a variety of items available designed to provide partners across the country with easy access to different tools, resources that assist in building an inclusive community of practice, both for our VITA Tax Coalition partners as well as other asset building coalitions around the country, financial institutions, other entities that are providing services to ensure that, again, persons with disabilities and their families are included. A few of the highlights of our disability virtual toolkit is disability awareness training for VITA volunteers. We'll go over that a little bit later. Getting started with social media, which is a really great way of getting kind of the basics of social media, not only just for outreach to persons with disabilities, but just in general. We know many of the organizations that we work with are often either grassroots or working with, of course, less staff than some of the larger organizations, and so it's a really good basic guide that Nakia Matthews, our IT person and guru on the phone, put together that really gives the basics of social media, disability outreach flyers that you can utilize and adapt to engage persons with disabilities in your coalitions, different effective strategies and scenarios, and of course TaxAccess, which we'll talk about as well. First, let me talk about our disability awareness training, which really provides really good basic tips on interacting with persons with disabilities, information to eliminating certain myths or stereotypes that might pertain to persons with disabilities often, increasing awareness of a growing demographic served at free tax sites. So the training will include such things as what is disability, different types of disabilities. Often we know that individuals don't always think of certain disabilities, perhaps those with mental health issues or other types of hidden disabilities such as dyslexia, epilepsy, etc., as actual types of disabilities. So we'll go over some of those in the disability awareness training. The importance of people first language. We know that language often forms the partnerships and the communication that takes place, and it does become very important. Tips to better communication when it comes to persons with disabilities, and different service animals, what service animals are and how to interact with them. We have two different ways that you can access our disability learning course. You can do that through our e-learning course, which is a really great way for tax coalitions to be able to either incorporate this into the VITA training that they're already doing. We understand completely that the VITA training that you're doing for IRS certified volunteers is, of course, lengthy as it is, and you're trying to get through a lot of material. So it's either good you can incorporate this into it or use it as a take-home homework kind of thing that individuals can do on their own, and that way you can have them go through the e-learning course. It is self-paced, and they can do that at their own leisure. This is also really good for any asset development partners in the community who are looking to do outreach to the disability community as well. Once again, you could give this to employees or partners and let them go through this at their own pace when they have time. And it's completely free and available, again, on our website and through the link that is provided here. You can also download the script in a PowerPoint presentation, the Disability Awareness, which is a training specifically for VITA volunteers, which it will go through many of the things I talked about earlier. Again, it is a PowerPoint, so if you were able to incorporate this into training that you're already doing, then you will have a script in the notes section that if you wanted to, you could absolutely kind of read it verbatim, or you could have, you know, make it your own and really get into depth. There's a couple of activities as well. So it's another good way of providing disability awareness training to volunteers and individuals. We also go over site accessibility within that training, specifically for site coordinators. We know, and we really try to explain to individuals that site accessibility, though, it really is for everyone. So it's a really good tool for your site coordinators, but it's also really important to emphasize to any volunteer who's going to be working in within a tax site, because in order to ensure continued accessibility, it's really important that everyone's aware of common barriers that can be removed and avoid on a day-to-day basis. So a good example of this might be if you have made an accessible path of travel throughout your facility, ensuring that there's wide enough aisles and, you know, individuals are able to get through as a wheelchair user, or who might be low vision using a cane, etc. And then someone comes in and they either move furniture or they move a trash can or a chair, then there can be a barrier that's put in place. So when I say site accessibility is for everyone, it just kind of gives the overview of how important it is that everyone understands the need for that. We have several samples of effective strategies listed here. There are many more on our virtual toolkit online. You can see there's one for examples of people first language. Our effective strategies are usually 1 to 2 pages, and they give a really good overview pretty quickly of you know, what it is we're trying to talk about. Again, expanding free tax prep to the deaf, hard of hearing, diversifying your disability outreach. This is a question we get over and over. As we know, you know, many individual organizations and coalitions want to expand their outreach to disability community and want to know how to do that. So we've put together an effective strategy that will give you a good sample of different disability organizations that you can partner with in your local community, and then tips on how to do that. Making accommodation requests for taxpayers with disabilities. Karen went over some of the accommodations earlier, and this effective strategy gives you some really good examples of how you can ensure that accommodation requests, one, are being promoted by placing an accommodation statement on the flyer. And we know that by doing that, not only are you, you know, fitting the spirit of the law by saying we'll make accommodations, but most importantly, you're also allowing individuals to know that your facility, your services are open to persons with disabilities, and you're willing to work with individuals with disabilities surrounding accommodation requests. There's also samples of accommodation statements listed on that effective strategy, which many people will say, we want to make sure we're providing accommodations, and we want to put the statement on our flyers, but can you give us a good example of how we do that? And that can be done in very simple ways, and this gives you some really good tips on how to do that if you have limited space or if you're looking to do it on your website, etc. TaxAccess, I'll go over in a minute. We have effective strategies giving Amendment Acts of 2008, requirements affecting VITA sites and services, marketing your VITA site and services to persons with disabilities, disability access statements, and then disability statistics that you can use as well, so that we know that many individuals are looking for statistics which often speak volumes to partners that they're trying to reach and incorporate into their outreach and their programs. TaxAccess, we touched on briefly earlier. It is really a great program that we have been doing in partnership with the Southeast ADA Center for 3 or 4 years now, and it really provides a safe place for volunteer income tax assistants, site coordinators, and volunteers to ask questions, find resources on how they can serve people with disabilities more effectively. So when I say a safe place, it really is, one, it is powered and answered by experts within the disability field, because there will be someone from the Southeast ADA Center answering your questions. And when I say the Southeast ADA Center, that is the center that has agreed to work with us to ensure the questions are answered. However, it is available to everyone nationally across the country. So anyone who has a question surrounding disability issues related to VITA services, including facility access, program accessibility, and customer service, they are welcome to go on to the Southeast ADA TaxAccess website and either get the phone number to call in and ask questions, or they're welcome to actually go online and email their questions. When they say that they are a VITA site, they will be given priority response to questions when calling in, and when using their Ask Your Question form, they will also be given priority to ensure that your answer is, you receive an answer within 24 to 48 hours. Again, those are trained by ADA specialists, so we greatly encourage individuals to call in and ask questions that they might have. Additionally, there's a lot of good training tools available, checklists, some of the ones that Karen mentioned earlier, and a lot of resources to provide some really great opportunities for tax coalitions to make sure that their sites are accessible, questions are being answered, and that they're outreaching effectively to persons with disabilities. So with that, I am going to turn it over to any questions we might have. You can submit your questions via the Q&A or the chat box. Karen, I have just one or two, and then if Nakia has any, I'll ask her to chime in as well. But we did have one. We don't allow pets in our VITA sites, so how do I determine if an animal is truly a service animal? Karen?
Okay. Oh, well, basically, you can ask. You're allowed to ask a few questions. First is you can't specifically ask what is your disability, but you can ask what does your service animal do for you in regards to your disability? What has your service animal been trained to do for you to accommodate your disability? So you can ask about what the service animal does. Also, in the new 2008 regulations, a service animal is defined as a dog. And so another type of service animal, like a monkey or that's a common one.
Snakes.
Snakes.
Snakes
are not considered. They have to be trained to specifically address an issue and accommodate a need for a person with a disability. In some cases, a miniature horse can be considered a service animal, but it's either a dog or a miniature. In some cases, a miniature horse is a service animal.
Great, thanks, Karen.
And of course, I'm sorry, but of course you also, that individual is responsible for making sure that their service animal behaves, does not cause any problems, does not mess up the facility, and if they do any of those things, you have every right to ask them to leave if they can't control their service. To ask them to remove the animal if they cannot control their animal.
Great, thank you, Karen. Another question that came in is if you could expand on discussing accommodations for persons with learning disabilities.
Well, some of the accommodations for learning disabilities can be the same as we discussed for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or even blind, because like a note taker may be necessary for someone with a learning disability. Some people with learning disabilities relate better to or understand information that is given verbally as opposed to in writing, so they may not be able to read the information and comprehend it, but they can hear the information and comprehend it, so a reader may be effective for them. Materials in electronic format can be very helpful because the individual may have text-to-speech software on their computer so that they can listen instead of having to read, rely on written information. So those would be some of the accommodations for people with learning disabilities, and they may make an accommodation request, just like someone who's deaf or hard of hearing may make an accommodation request.
Great, thank you. Another, I believe you touched on this earlier, but just to cover again, am I required to provide sign language interpreters if requested? And we have a very limited budget for these types of services. Any suggestions?
If you, whether or not you have to provide an interpreter, it really depends on the resources of your individual organization. However, it will also depend on the financial resources of all of your partner or your parent organization or grant funding perhaps that you're getting. And when you're doing the budget for your program, accommodations should be a line item in that budget. So you should be preparing for accommodations in advance. And also developing those partnerships in your community may also help you share in the cost of those interpreters, and also taking advantage of some of the new technology such as video remote interpreting, so where you can contract with an interpreter off-site and may even be able to use your existing conferencing equipment such as a laptop or a tablet or your PC.
Great suggestions. I think we have time for one more before we wrap up. Under the revised 2000 ADA regulations, a public or private business cannot require an individual with a disability to bring another individual to interpret for him or her. However, cannot require to bring another individual, but if the individual prefers to bring someone, is that allowable under the ADA?
Yes, it is allowable as long as the person that they're asking to interpret for them also agrees to that. So that, say for example, if a person comes and they brought their adult child, for example, their son, and they're saying, I would like for him to interpret for me, the son also has to agree to that.
Great.
And also you can ask, and if there is an emergency in that case, you may have, it may be okay to ask for an individual who's with the person to interpret for you. For example, let's just say an extreme emergency like a fire or whatever. Those will be instances where it would be okay to ask someone else to interpret.
Thanks, Karen. I want to thank you, Karen, for coming on and sharing this information with us. We get a lot of requests around accommodations and accessibility and how do we make these provisions. So we want to thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. We also want to remind everyone that this PowerPoint, as Makia mentioned at the beginning, along with a recording of the webinar, will be available on our website at www.realeconomicimpact.org. under our archived webinars, probably early next week. And so you are welcome to download the PowerPoint, which will have the links that we talked about today available, as well as the recording. You're also welcome to contact myself, Katie Metz, and my contact information will be included in the PowerPoint, as well as Karen Hamilton for any follow-up questions that you might have. We want to thank again our sponsors, especially Walmart Foundation, for providing us with the ability to give you this information today and present this webinar. And we also have several social media pages that we encourage you to follow and really get more information at any time when it comes to access, accommodations, and outreach to the disability community. So with that, we'll wrap up a few minutes early, and I encourage you to contact either Karen or myself or my colleagues at the National Disability Institute for additional questions, comments, or suggestions for the future. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great tax season and happy holidays and a new year. Thank you.